So, I uploaded a video last month submitting a manga to yet another damn contest, and we are now past the July 31st date, which means the results are in. Surprise, I didn't win, but that's okay because that means I can now flip through the entire comic and show you all. For context, I submitted a manga entry to the Silent Manga Audition, which runs a couple times a year, and they only ask you to submit an entirely silent comic with no dialogue that could be done in any medium. If you want to see the finer details of the contest and the materials I used and my rough process, please go ahead and watch this video first. And because we are now past the date of the results announcement and I didn't win, I can now show you guys my entry. I don't want this video to get too long, so we will get right into it. So usually I put all of my completed comics into a clear presentation book right after I finish them just to archive them and keep them safe, but I hold off doing so that I can film this flip through. So we have my handy Kamoto Hashikamo folder where I put all my works in progress, and voila, all 8 completed pages of my comic. As mentioned in my previous video, I decided 2 weeks before the deadline to cook up this comic, and here is 2 weeks worth of non-stop work. I'll probably do a more detailed walkthrough of each page before doing a full comic flip. As a refresher, the theme for this contest round was letters, in which we were to show a letter that would invoke a certain emotion from our character, without the use of dialogue of course. And in this comic, I decided to make the letter reveal parts of the story at the very end. So this first page here is to establish the character who is this female officer here. I definitely feel like I need to brush up on my action paneling, but alas, this was a very rushed entry after all. I utilize a lot of speedline to indicate action and motion in each of the panel, and of course use a variety of screen tones to portray different values of the clothes. I really like the cross-hatching effect that I did in the background of this bottom panel here, and instead of an expression of heroic triumph of arresting this criminal, I made sure to show a more solemn expression on our main character's face. I do want to note that I also made sure that her expressions are stoic and have a lack of emotion throughout the comic. More on that later, it is story relevant. So we transition into the second page, which is still wrapping up the police arrest, and work to transition into the following scene. Once again, I'm using screen tone and cross-hatching effects to add more variety to the background. Fun fact, I do recall running out of one of the screen tone shades, then seeing it sold out on the site I would usually buy it off of, and have to be super conscious on how much I used up. I want to say this was the last page I completed, so I think we were at maybe a really small part of the screen tones left, and I was just trying to save every last millimeter just to make sure I didn't run out. So, needless to say, it was a very close call. Anyway, I'm showing that even while interacting with her colleagues and answering the phone, the character is mostly expressionless. Cross-hatching effect makes yet another appearance. And then the next page is another transitional page that not only shows her flying somewhere else, but also has an outfit change altogether. I really love drawing those clouds in the sky and then leaving a completely white streak just to indicate a plane flying through. I used sticky notes just to make sure I kept those edges clean. And then, of course, in areas where I did feel that I overdid it with the line, I used a good old whiteout just to hide those mistakes. The beauty of drawing on paper is that a lot of these whiteout marks do not show up in the scans at all, so I'm able to white out and correct things manually to my heart's content. And then we have the scene of her running from the airport here. I believe I used one of my personal airport photos that I've taken as a reference, and then more running with not only an outfit change, but also now her hair is out of the ponytail. Ooh, in this panel here, I definitely leaned into my knowledge of drawing backgrounds back when I recreated the Inuyasha manga page. I wanted to portray those sunbeams going through the trees to indicate that it was the middle of the day and the sun is very high up in the sky. Used a ton of screen tones for this page, but I say it's a good screen tones well spent. Now here on the 4th page, we have her now clearly visiting a cemetery, hence why her dress is all in black. I like to think that the shawl she's wearing is also black, but because it's the see-through and sheer, I wanted to portray that in a black and white comic. I used a screen tone, hope that was made clear. I will say when I started drawing this comic, I didn't know how I wanted to draw the sky. And the beauty of working on comics or on a project-based regimen is that you're always hit with something you don't usually draw, and then you have to come up with a stylistic choice on the spot. So here I decided to go with spaced out vertical line and just shape out the clouds. I could have easily slapped in a sky screen tone, but I felt that would be way too overwhelming for the page. And then we have her waiting until the last visitor has left the grave before she steps out and marks her arrival to the fresh grave. I think because I was rushing on a very tight deadline, I didn't really get the chance to draw in those flowers. But next time, I like to see if I could zoom in and get all of those nitty gritty details out. I was using a G pen nib the entire time, and it's really thick for the smaller lines, so I'll be sure to switch up the ink nibs as well. Even with the close-up of my character's face, she is still expressionless. I opted to do cross-hatching for the trees in the back here as opposed to a solid black just to make it more visually interesting. Since her hair was already solid black along with her collar, I didn't want to add another slap of, solid black, and it would be way too heavy on the composition. And then we head on to the 6th page where it will transition the readers to the final scene of this comic. I also think I made a good call in making the sky a vertical line because this panel is able to portray the still air before a gust of wind suddenly picks up and flies a small piece of paper toward our character. If it wasn't noticeable already, drawing hands have always been a major pain point for me, and I think one of these days I'll really sit down and learn how to study and master them because I cannot handle looking at this. Oh my god, more janky hands. More close-ups of her grabbing this random piece of paper. I mean, if I were her, I too would be so curious and just read the letter. At least it doesn't say, I'm pleased to inform you of your extended car warranty, or something like that. In the next page, the vertical line for the sky here once again shows that the air is still and that the wind has stopped. Also to show a moment where she is reading and processing what's in the letter. Side note, I used so much whiteout for this particular panel because I think I freehanded the line thinking I got it. I don't got it, so I had to white it all out and redo it again with a ruler. So she'd read the letter at this point, and I didn't quite reveal what the letter said yet, but I wanted to silently show visual cues of her reaction, like her hand trembling and her face scrunching up before we zoom out and really see her full face. Now, I'm not the best at drawing emotions, but I really tried to add all of the face wrinkles, paid extra attention to the eye shade, and tried to really push that she was crying in sadness. I do think that grief is a very powerful emotion, but I feel like it's romanticized in fiction where especially a female character would look attractive while crying. I don't know about you, but I'm ugly as fuck when I'm full on crying, so I definitely wanted to push some shapes here and really show that grief could also be ugly. And now I'm using vertical line to portray her falling down to her knees here on this last panel. And we are now at the last and final page where the contents of the letter is revealed. Thanks for catching my killer. I will say my personal handwriting is naturally pretty bad, and this is how I write when I'm locked in, but definitely wanted to portray that handwritten look, so I think I achieved that. And here at the end is the character crying with the spirit of the dead person comforting her. Whether or not she is aware of the spirit is up for interpretation. I think I decided that the spirit and the victim was either a friend or someone that the character personally knew, and that she was murdered by the killer that was arrested in the first page. For the main character to have such a vivid emotional reaction to the letter, I do think a pre-existing relationship with the victim would have been able to push my character into tears that she had been holding in throughout the story. If you didn't spoil yourself by watching the previous video or looking up my comic on the Silent Manga website, the comic was titled Until It's All Over. In layman terms, it's basically her holding onto her emotion and not crying until the very end of the case. Hence why she was so emotionless throughout the story, since I wanted to make sure her crying at the end had some emotional impact. Obviously, it's very hard to build feeling and emotional investment toward a character in such a small amount of pages, but it was a good attempt nonetheless. Super side tangent, I used to play a ton of Ace Attorney, and I mean I would play and replay it throughout my high school year. And the specific quote I remember from the Trials and Tribulation game is that when Mia Fey and her colleague would fail to win a case in one of the trials, one of the quotes he says is not to cry until it's all over. And out of context, this is a very basic quote, but it was something that I eventually revolved my story around. Anyways, wanted to give credit where credit is due. Shout out to Ace Attorney for coming out with banger games, and a small quote that really helped me title this comic. And yeah, that basically concludes the entire flip through of my Silent Manga Audition entry. I really enjoy coming up with the idea and executing the comic in those 2 very long 2 weeks. It was definitely a challenge to balance both my job and my life with grinding on this comic, but I felt it was well worth it in the end. And I managed to get everything done a couple hours before the deadline. So I do go over the details of making this comic in the previous video, so check that out if you're interested. Thank you so much for all of your support for not only for the Silent Manga Edition video, but I do intend to keep submitting entries not because I want to win a prize, but also because working with a pre-existing theme really helps me get inspired to build a comic and story idea around it. Maybe one day I'll be able to completely fill out this clear book with just comics. I do want to keep drawing lots of short comics in hopes of improving my overall comic drawing skills, so definitely look forward to more stories. And if there are any comics or manga content that you're aware of, feel free to send them over to me or pop them down in the comments and I'll see what I can cook up and show you guys. That's all for me today. Now you guys keep drawing and I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye!